But we also need to understand that for a fact it is true that LTT exerts enormous amount of power over the civilians. They prevent them from leaving certain areas. That is a fact. We should face it. But that is only a section of the people. There are a large number of Tamil civilians living in that area. They won't live there. So it is not a black and white issue. Right?
Okay. Yes, I completely agree with Cheran, because the population who live there, that's their home. That's their grandfather's land. They are there for generations, for centuries. Why do they want to leave? They don't want to uproot themselves from that area and go and live in an illegal detention camp. And also, the ceasefire was broken by Sri Lankan government. Sri Lankan government is the only party who walked away from the ceasefire, not the LTT. LTT wanted to stay in the ceasefire. They want to have those ceasefire.
Could you comment, though, on Asoka's claim, which is that every time a ceasefire has been put in place in the past, the LTTE used that opportunity to rearm themselves?
That's what they say, but that's not true. But who walked away from the ceasefire? Sri Lankan government. It was an internationally mediated ceasefire. There were international players, but they unilaterally broke the ceasefire and walked away from them.
Anna, can you help us at all on this one, Anna?
Yeah, I want to go just one step back and say that you talked a little bit about the safe areas that Sri Lankan government declared for the civilians to move in, and that was supposed to be seen as the first step to protect civilians. But what was happening in the safe areas definitely was not a demonstration of Sri Lankan government taking care of the civilians. Again, I'm just talking based on documentation that we did in Sri Lanka 2 weeks ago. These safe areas were repeatedly shelled and bombed by Sri Lankan armed forces. And we documented dozens, and there were clearly many more, of deaths and hundreds of injuries of civilians that occurred in these safe areas. The same is true for hospitals, for instance. So essentially what was happening is that Sri Lankan government, to a certain extent, used the grim LTT practices to justify its own atrocities. And that's why, as I was saying at the very beginning, civilians are caught between a rock and a hard place. And obviously, one thing that immediately needs to happen is for people to get out. And then, we can talk a little bit more about how that can be possible.
Okay, stand by 1 second, please. Stand by, Anna. Through the Bob Ray interview that started the program, and now through our discussions here and our maps, we've seen what the situation is like on the ground. We have some background that will help us understand whether peace is at all achievable in this civil war, which has been going on full-throated since 1983. And I mentioned at the top that I'd received a number of emails today, a lot more emails than normal, before going on the air. I'd like to read an excerpt from one of them I got, and then we'll start to talk after that. If we could, this first email, please. It says, please do understand the root cause of all these calamities is due to the successive Sri Lankan government's refusal to address the cultural and political grievances of the minority Tamil people since the independence, which was 1948. The continuous physical and mental harassing of Tamils with utter disregard to decency and law radicalized the Tamil youths, convincing many of them that the peaceful strategy of Tamil political leaders using legal and constitutional means to get equal rights would never work. Okay, Asoka, to you first. How accurate is that in your view?
I think this is the standard line that the LTTE uses to justify all their activities.
Is it inaccurate?
I think so. I mean, people say that the Tamil people have grievances. I'm sure they have some, but I've never really heard what they are. I can give you...
well, here's a couple here. A lack of respect for cultural and political issues.
I would reject that. I would reject that. I mean, when I lived in Sri Lanka, and then there were lots of cultural events. The Tamil people were...
How to interpret the Sri Lankan flag?
Sorry, say again?
So why can't we ask him to explain what the Sri Lankan flag stands for? Is there any notion of equality in the flag?
The Sri Lankan,
it's a symbol of the Sinhalese.
The Sri Lankan flag has a part of it which is dedicated to Tamil.
So what is the part? It's only tiny strip. It's large lion holding a sword. That's a symbol of the Sinhalese people. And that lion faces a small green strip. That means a Muslim. And a small stripe. So that is an extreme symbol.
Let him come back.
The Tamil people were 8% of the population. So do you want half the flag dedicated to Tamil people?
It is not the question now.
What about the Muslim people? What about the Muslim people?
This is the fundamental
problem. What about the Burger people?
Well, hang on.
It is not.
Just a minute.
It is not liberal democracy.
Sharon, he is asking the question that Sinhalese make up the 3/4 of the people.
The large majority.
The vast majority. There are 8% Muslim, I think, 7 or 8% Muslim. Tamils make up fewer than 20% of the population.
No, it's 8%.
But
Well, we can argue about this,
Yeah.
but the point is, the flag has to represent everybody, right?
So if there is an argument, why would, for example, take the Canadian national flag? You think the French Canadians and the English Canadians are equal in numbers? Why do we have the red and white and maple leaf? It is not a question of numbers. This is the problem with this, this kind of illiberal democracy that is Sri Lanka. It is a question of politics of recognition and understanding, equality and dignity. That is what repeatedly the Sri Lankan government has successfully failed.
Okay. David, then Lenin.
Mr. Yapa is denying, actually, is lying right in front of the TV here.
Well,
there are no problem.
we're not going to use that kind of language.
I'm
here
sorry,
tonight.
excuse
Okay.
me. And what we are trying to say, it's deliberate genocidal policies thrust upon on Sri Lankan Tamils for a period of 60 years created this situation. Tigers didn't fall from sky. They were created by successive Sri Lankan chauvinistic
Again,
government
because
policies.
why? What are the issues that Tamils
For an
care about?
example, I come from the part of the eastern part of the Sri Lanka, where 100 years back, the Sinhala population was only 4% out of 100%. 62% were Tamils, 32% were Muslims. And now, after 100 years, the population is almost equal. Where did the Sinhalese come from? Sinhalese and Tamils have the equal birth rate, and they marry, their culture are the same. And how did they come? Sinhala governments colonized people in thousands and thousands and brought them and robbed our land.
Okay, Lenin, your turn.
Yeah, I totally deny this thing. This is a
You
propaganda.
deny what?
Yeah, the propaganda of the Tamils becoming a minority in their own land. Because if you take an example, there are 10 lakhs Tamil people living in the south. So what do you mean to say if the Sinhalese will say their lands are grabbed by the Tamil community? Is it not so?
Just a minute, let him finish. Go ahead.
10 lakhs people, 1 million people, 10 lakhs people, right, living in the south with the Sinhala brothers equally, and they enjoy all the benefits of the country. And if you see, there is not even one Sinhalese person living in the north, which has been ethnic cleansing by the Tigers. And again, we have not allowed even the Muslims, our own Tamil Muslims in the north. We have driven them away from our province, which they are living in Chilav and Puttalam as a refugee in their own soil.
Let me get Anna into the discussion here. Anna, we've heard two things referenced in particular here. A lack of respect by the Sinhalese for the Tamil culture and for Tamil political grievances. Based on your knowledge and your having been in the area, how accurate are those allegations?
Steve, I will try to push my agenda here. I mean, all of these issues are partially in place, and we can spend hours and hours discussing that. But I do think that at this particular moment, as we speak, Tamil civilians are being killed. And I think that is something that should be on the agenda right now. I do think that's one most important issue right now, that because of what LTTE does and because of what Sri Lankan armed forces do, civilian casualties are growing by the hour.
Okay, fair enough. In which case, let me read another. Now, this is from the International Crisis Group. We'll bring up our next graphic here, and I'll get everybody to comment on this one. Here's from the International Crisis Group. The nature of the main Tamil nationalist organization, the Liberation Tigers of Tamil Eelam, we've talked about them many times here, has made any peace settlement particularly hard. The LTTE has been banned in many countries because of its use of suicide bombers and child soldiers, widespread human rights abuses, and its intolerance of any dissent among Tamils. Okay, David, to you first. Do you agree, one sec, wait for the question, do you agree that the LTTE was wrong to try to achieve a separate Tamil state through violence?
It's not separate state to begin with. It's the restoration of independence. In 1976, there was a conference happened at Vatukota, a city in northern part of Sri Lanka. Political leaders of many parties from the Tamil parties, they assembled there. They made a declaration saying that we lived under this independence for 31 years. We fought non-violently for all these years to get our rights. We couldn't go anywhere. So we want to get our independence back. Remember, I told you at the very beginning.
But this is a question about violence. Do the LTTE's methods cause a problem for those who would like to see the kind of political development that you're talking about?
It goes in both ways because people in Sri Lanka, Tamils especially, they push to take up arms. As I told you, our leaders and our forefathers, grandfathers, they tried their level